The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be the most TV dudes you'll ever listen to? As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess, we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show. Hey there, TV lovers, and welcome to the latest episode of Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. I'm Shoosh Adam.
And I'm William Shoosh West. This episode, we are diving into one of the most bizarre, short-lived attempts at children's programming in the 90s, starring an international icon who was not ready for North American exposure. But first, we have to look back at our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
So, Will, our subject this time around is a children's program unlike any other, but there were so many different styles of kids shows during our childhoods in the 80s and 90s, but also you've often said on the show you didn't watch children's programming as a young child. So what was the first TV show for kids that you latched on to?
The Real Ghostbusters was my first foray into childhood. I remember it was very confusing to me because it was also kind of my introduction to syndicated kid shows, because like you had the new episodes on Saturday morning on ABC, but then you had the syndicated episodes on whatever, like here it was our Fox affiliate, and it was jarring because like the Saturday morning ones looked better because they kind of like evolved with the times. The colors got more vibrant and they like kept the pace with pop culture, while the weekday afternoon ones were just mired in 1987. But yeah, Real Ghostbusters is probably my first like kid show. How about you?
I definitely started a little earlier than that because Romper Room. That is the first show I remember watching at like 5 a.m. It was still dark outside. I'd get up myself, and our lever for the TV, you had to pull the little knob out, you know? But basically, for those who don't remember Romper Room, it was a preschool class on TV. There was just a nice lady and a bunch of kids, and I think it was like a regional thing. Like, it's just like everybody had their Romper Room lady. But the big thing I always was looking for was at the end of the episode, she would pull out a big magnifying glass and she would look into the camera and she'd say, "I see Judy and Bobby and Cindy, and I hope to see you next time." You know, it's just like, so if she got your name that episode, you're like, she saw me, you know? So like that was a big deal. But I think the biggest one, like again, like children's programming specifically meant for me, was the Electric Company, which, for those who don't remember, it was kind of like Sesame Street, but without Jim Henson. But what it lacked in Muppets, it made up for in Spider-Man. It had these segments that like started out with a comic book, and it would open, and then there was a live action costume Spider-Man who was like against like, you know, a green screen or probably blue screen back then. And he would have adventures like on these, like the screen became like comic book panel pages. So like one would be the action, the rest would be like drawings around him. And it was just really fun. He never spoke though. It was only like word balloons that would pop up. And then Morgan Freeman was on the show. So a young Morgan Freeman was narrating Spider-Man's adventures. Of course, didn't know that at the time, that he would be somebody of note. But it was so cool. And I remember being so excited as a kid whenever those segments would pop up. The rest of it, I was kind of like, it's okay, I guess, but Spider-Man's coming. Well,
I only tangentially know both of those shows. I've never seen Romper Room. I've heard of it. There's a joke in original Saved by the Bell that I never got. Screech is talking to Zach. He says something, and she's a doobie. And Zach like hits him with something. He's like, not romper room, you moron. And I was like, that was one of those jokes kind of like when you're watching adult stuff and it just goes over your head. Still don't get the reference. But like Electric Company, I didn't really watch it, but I subscribed to the magazine. I was really big into mail because I don't think they do this anymore, but back then, if you were like a minor and you got mail, you know how like men are Mr. and Mrs. and Miss, it would say Master. So like all my mail was Master William Bruce West till I was like 12. And I loved seeing that. So I got Sports Illustrated for Kids. I got Zillions, but like Electric Company had a magazine because everyone did, but then it evolved into something called Kid City once Electric Company ceased as a show. It's like, we're going to keep doing the stuff, but the name kind of is irrelevant at this point. And I feel like there was Spider-Man stuff in the magazine, but like that's my relationship with the Electric Company.
That is so interesting. Yeah, that you would know it mainly as a published entity and not as a television program. So that is cool. Well, here's the thing. Well, we're talking about mainly stuff from the 70s and the 80s here. So we got to figure out, though, what was going on at this time in the early 90s that gave XUXA the green light. So let's go back to the early days of television. Most programs at that time, we're talking about the 50s, right? They were filmed like a live stage show. And it felt like the children's programming was no different. You see, the old, what are they called? Kinescopes, like where they were actually filming the screen. For example, like, again, in the 50s, this is what my dad would tell me about. The immensely popular and influential Howdy Doody TV show, which ran for over a decade. It had an on-camera live studio audience of children called the Peanut Gallery. They would help sing the theme song. It's Howdy Doody time each episode. And then the kids there were entertained by puppets. Howdy Doody was a puppet. There were, all these other puppets. But also there were live actors who would appear in character. Clarabelle the Clown, he just communicated through a horn. He was mute. He didn't talk. They would do songs and funny bits for the crowd. So that was like a big cultural touchstone for a lot of people. Even like the Weird Al movie UHF, they have Uncle Nutsy's clubhouse becomes Stanley Spadowski's clubhouse. That's a very kind of Howdy Doody style show. But there was a grease-painted face on TV that popped up around the same time who acted as competition for that freckled cowboy marionette. And that was Bozo the Clown, which I feel like is a name we've all heard, but like our generation totally missed it because Bozo was a clown host character that was franchised out to local TV stations nationwide with a format where, he would show like cartoons and then he'd have kids play games and win prizes and things like that. But the thing was, each region had a different actor portraying this red-haired clown, same costume, kind of like Ronald McDonald over the years, right? Just change the actor underneath the makeup. But that continued into the 2000s. I think the last incarnation of Bozo was on a WGN. So it's just kind of weird. But yeah, by the 90s, this children's variety show format was pretty foreign to most kids our age. Like, we grew up watching syndicated cartoons and cable TV and all that kind of stuff. For most people, I think Krusty the Clown on The Simpsons, that was the closest they ever got to that type of programming. And that was like a parody of those shows we didn't have a frame of reference for. But Will, I'm curious, did you, maybe it was local, maybe it was public access, ever watch a kid's show in this kind of classic Bozo the Clown, Howdy Doody style formula?
Not really. I mean, like you said, they were kind of dead by that point, but our like UHF stations, so like we have channel 20. People tell me that 20 had one, but I feel like it was just a tad before I realized like things were going on. But I remember like the last gasp of that in this region, channel 54, which was a Baltimore station, but if it was the right time of day and I aimed the antenna in the right direction, I could get channel 54. I watched more Baltimore TV than DC because they had shows in syndication that we didn't, and they were shows that that I preferred for whatever reason. Like, this is back in the day when, like, you weren't guaranteed to air in every market when your show was syndicated, you know? Like, now everybody's like, oh, Friends 5 times a week. And sure, the bigger shows, but like, I was watching Punky Brewster weekday afternoons in 1994 when nobody cared, you know, because that's Baltimore for you. They didn't have the full show anymore, but they used that format as the bumpers. So it was like the afternoons would be hosted by like the 54 Kids Club, and then at some point they like evolved into like a space theme, and I think that's when it was like really done. There was like this old guy who kind of was like, it's almost like Mr. Wizard, like their teacher or whatever, but they just needed that chaperone, and there would be kids around, but it wasn't really like interactive. They just kind of like announced the shows that you were watching, and then they like pop up during commercial break. But like I said, this was done by like 93. Yeah, that was the last experience of this I had. What about you?
So I'm sure you were aware of, if not watching, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, right, Will?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so in my area, when the Super Mario Brothers Super Show hit the airwaves, the Los Angeles TV station that it aired on, KTTV Channel 11, was our Fox affiliate. They aired a Deke-produced live-action kids show that came on right after Captain Lou and Danny Wells were done singing Do the Mario, and it was called King Koopa's Cool Cartoons.
But
Yes, nobody knows about this. So it was hosted by this like rough talking guy in a full lizard man costume. He looked like King Koopa from the Super Mario Brothers cartoon segments. He had the tuxedo coat. He had like a full bodysuit that had a tail. He had the crown. He had a full prosthetic snout and like makeup and everything. He looked like King Koopa, but he would do just the bozo thing. He showed old cartoons that nobody cared about anymore, public domain stuff. He had kids competing in games to win Nintendo prizes, which is of course why it was exciting to us. You can win Nintendo stuff. He had a pet puppet rat that he would talk to also. Now, here's the thing. It only aired in Southern California for like 3 months, during which time the original actor playing King Koopa got fired and a replacement was brought in. It was like for 1 more month and then it was over anyway. But the reason like I always sticks out of my memory is one afternoon I turned on the TV, watching Mario Brothers, I'm watching King Koopa's Cool Cartoons, and I see in the audience a guy I thought was my friend named Brent. He was in the audience with a King Koopa t-shirt. He had the hat, which was like those, you know, like with the Goofy or the Donald hats at Disneyland. That's like the top half of their head. They gave those to the kids in the audience, a King Koopa hat head thing, you know, to wear. And I was just like, you went without me? You didn't invite me? And I was like over at this kid's house like a couple days a week playing with all his toys and all this stuff. I thought we were friends, but he got to go to like the Masters of the Universe live stage show, you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming out of their shells tour. Like his mom took him to all the cool stuff and I was never invited. And so it's one of those things that's always stuck out of my mind because that was like the last time I ever saw anything like that. And it was such a flash in the pan that there is now like a Wikipedia entry. Like some people have found
I just found it.
Yeah, there's like very small clips of it and some screen caps, but like a full episode like doesn't exist anywhere.
That's so crazy. Like, you witnessed this kid's NWO heel turn. He opened his shirt to a shirt that said Adam sucks. And your friendship was over.
Over.
Well, in the 80s, many shows were brought over from other countries for the United States children's audience. For example, what's now considered the classic Nickelodeon lineup of You Can't Do That on Television, Today's Special, and Dave Coulier hosting Out of Control were all originally Canadian productions. Meanwhile, an icon of animated syndicated TV, Voltron was created by taking multiple Japanese cartoons, re-editing them together, and dubbing them in English. Bringing over non-English speaking hosts from another country had proved disastrous in the 70s with the Pink Lady and Jeff variety show. But by the 90s, it seemed that one foreign star who dominated South American kids television in multiple countries was ready to try and duplicate that success in the USA. Adam, can you think of any other foreign import star that successfully crossed over to television?
It's tricky. Like think about that. Like, I'm like, what? Ricardo Montalban is the star of Fantasy Island, but I don't know. He's probably lived in the U.S. for decades by that point. The Latin invasion for pop music, at least, didn't really happen for a few more years. We were getting the Macarena and Mark Anthony and Ricky Martin and Enrique Iglesias. Eventually, Shakira was kind of the end of that. But I mean, there were always British stars, but that doesn't really count because they speak English as their first language. So like, I was racking my brain, like, what was there? There were adaptations of foreign properties, right? Like, Three's Company, right? Like but that again, that was just a British show, right? So wasn't even French or something, So like, it was really hard. Can you think of anybody that managed to like break and really like English wasn't their first language?
First off, I'm very offended that you said Ricardo Montalban for Fantasy Island when he was Khan.
Well, I know that, but we're talking TV here.
He was. He debuted in the original series.
That's true.
He comes back in Wrath of Khan. But the only one I can really think of, and it's really just a cheat, is going to be like Pat Morita because of Happy Days. And I don't like, he wasn't a star.
But he's not Japanese. I mean, he's Japanese, but he's American. Like yeah, his accent is Mr. Miyagi, and then he did his Arnold on Happy Days. That was put on. He just has a regular American accent.
Oh, well, now I feel betrayed.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is such a foreign idea. And so, like, we have to figure out what was it about this South American superstar that they thought was going to work. So let me give you the lowdown on Xuxa. Xuxa was a former model who became an icon of Brazilian children's television by hosting Show da Xuxa, starting in 1986, where the soundtrack album for that series sold 2 million copies, which was more than any native Brazilian artist ever had sold in their country. Then the follow-up albums sold just as well. Then Xuxa starred in this movie called Lua de Cristal, which is like Crystal Moon, in 1990, which became a box office hit. And she had many more like cinematic adventures that made her the most successful figure in Brazilian cinema history. She sold like 37 million tickets, right? Which nobody had done. So she's conquered TV, music, film. That was all in like 5 years. And then she's ranked the 37th in the 40 richest celebrities of 1991 in Forbes magazine. So not even just in country, in the world. It was the first time any Brazilian had ever been listed on the Forbes list. So Xuxa then duplicated her success during that period. She traded in her native Portuguese for Spanish, was a big hit in Argentina, and then she like imported this Spanish language version of her show to Univision. A lot of people know that in the States, it's the Spanish language Mexican TV station, And so that was 1992. By this point, People magazine ranks her as one of the 50 most beautiful people in the world. So she is getting exposure in the States, but apparently by 1993, Xuxa was on the map enough that she was ready to make her mark on American television with her own self-titled show. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg for everything that she's all about. But I mean, just imagine that, like just this person who's just like the most famous person in her country. And she's like, now, America!
I mean, she definitely has the accolades, but I can't believe that the guy who created the Brazilian wax isn't richer than she is.
That's the thing, right? Because she is like this mogul, and we'll get into this a little bit later. She must have just retained the rights to everything she did. She didn't have a manager. She's like, I'm handling it for me or something. Because yeah, you never hear about the other person who stole her money and she's destitute. She's still mega rich and mega popular right now in Brazil. But well, it sounded like she was pushing the button to head from South America up to North America. So we got to find out what her show was all about with our elevator pitch.
Well, Xuxa debuted in first-run syndication throughout the United States from September 13th, 1993 to December 10th, 1993, with just 65 episodes to its name before being canceled. In 1994, the show moved to the Family Channel cable network for 2 years of reruns. XUXA received a big multimedia push on Entertainment Tonight and other TV shows, and it included a Barbie-like doll, a music album where she sang in English, VHS tapes, and even a merch giveaway in children's magazines of the day, where kids could win a XUXA-branded portable cassette player. The show was produced by someone who knew a thing or two about musical shows for children. Thomas W. Lynch, the creator of Kids Incorporated. Oh, we talked about him last episode. The other attempt to get the attention of American audiences was by promoting appearances by guest stars like the Olsen Twins, Raven-Symoné, Alvin and the Chipmunks, American Gladiators, Harlem Globetrotters, Macho Man Randy Savage, ooh yeah, Weird Al Yankovic, and from our recent Saved by the Summer series, Bob Golick from Saved by the Bell the College Years, and Max himself, Ed Alonzo. Adam, did you watch XUXA during its original airing in 1993?
I did. Now, I watched as much TV as I could cram in before school. Like, literally, as I'm walking out the door, I'm still watching, James Bond Jr. or whatever was airing in the morning. And I just remember when XUXA just appeared, unannounced, as far as I knew. You talked about this multimedia push. I knew about none of that until it was on my TV screen. And I was completely baffled. Like, it was almost hypnotic how literally foreign it all was to, like, my American sensibilities. So I watched it like for a week. I gave up on it and I forgot about it. I was just like, that was weird. That's not for me. It never got better. Okay. Then I moved to Brazil in 2002 and suddenly it was XUXA 24/7 everywhere I looked. And I had flashbacks to that one week in 1993 and I couldn't believe how omnipresent she was in that country. Okay. So like I would see posters for her children's albums or makeup products, for teens in store windows. If I went to someone's house, they had her CDs and videotapes. If the TV was on, she had some type of show airing. I lived for a while in this resort community. It was called Campos do Jordão. And one day, someone pointed out to me this big mansion on its kind of like own private side of the mountain. And they told me that's XUXA's house. Like, I'm sure she has many all over the country, but that's her winter home or whatever. So she is a goddess in that country. Like, there is nobody more famous in all of media. Like, say, next to Pele, but she dated Pele for many years. She's the most beloved icon in Brazil, I would say. So, like, I'm going to provide more context as we get further into our discussion, but I was so amazed and I continue to be amazed. They love her so much. She could do no wrong, But, Will, what about you? Did you experience this show firsthand?
Oh, yeah. I knew it was coming because something they used to do that they just don't do anymore. In syndication, like, those channels really pimped those shows. Like, I would say, like, late July, you start seeing Family Matters 5 days a week starting September 14th. And it was always like September 7th or September 14th. That's why, like, this week right now, I always get like a feeling. I get this charge because syndication season's about to start. But nothing goes into syndication anymore, so it makes me a little sad. But like, I knew she was coming, but I couldn't glean what this show was gonna be about from those quick commercials, and this is a very interesting time. I'm 12 years old at this point, and there is a very pretty woman in like cheerleader costumes coming on as I'm getting dressed for school every morning. I mean, 1993 was a watershed year. I get Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and this angel in the same fall scene.
You mentioned that doll that existed that was marketed. They say it like sold out and it had to be like a new order put in and all that stuff. One of the people who bought that was my friend's grandma. I was mentioning we were doing the show. He's like, yeah, my grandma had a XUXA doll. I'm like, what? Why? Was she a Barbie collector? He's like, no, I think she just thought it was cool. I was like, that is so weird.
I have a XUXA doll.
What?
Like, I wish I could show it to you. I got it. I used to do this like blog series called Thrift Justice, where my friend Mike and I did a ton of yard sales and flea markets and all that. I found a XUXA doll like in box. And then so like when I had kids, this is how long ago it was, I gave it to my oldest and she did what girls do. She ripped it open and stripped her naked. Like, once Shusha's naked, you really can't tell her from Barbie that well. So I don't know if she's even still in the house. Sometimes I find pieces of her clothes. I kept the sticker that came in the box. In fact, my quest at RetroCon last week was to replace her. But I own a Shusha doll in here somewhere.
That's amazing. Well, Will, I feel like we have to describe the format of the show to truly give everybody listening a glimpse of the madness that was Shusha. Now, it is on YouTube. You can go see it for yourself. But at the beginning of each episode, we were treated to children chanting Shusha, 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 until she emerged from a globe amidst a plume of fog. She was lip-syncing her theme song while trying to navigate the roughly 50 to 75 children who were packed onto her set. They're jumping, they're hooting, they're hollering. They have flags of every country they're waving around. Her helpers were two furries. One was named Jelly, who was dressed as a panda that wore a t-shirt vest combo, maybe some hammer pants, whatever you want to call them, while the other was a jaguar man named Jam, who wore a hoodie. He did a lot of flips. And also in the mix were four young female, what they called pixies. They were dressed in sexy short toy soldier costumes, and they helped wrangle the children. They acted as backup dancers to the host as she was singing. Now, Shusha would have kids from the audience separated into teams to compete in multiple, like, messy Double Dare style games with lots of gelatin. There was goop flying around, whatever. There was sumo wrestling. It was a free-for-all. You never knew what you were going to get in these games. But no matter who won, everyone got a prize. She called it a present. She always said that everybody gets a present. Then she would introduce her special guest for the episode. Now, we've already listed a bunch of the super recognizable ones, but she also had a lot of, like, animal trainers and weird entertainers you've never heard of who probably, like, entertain at corporate parties. Like, the kids get entertained over here, you know? But she had, like, rollerblading dancers and just all these people that would come in. Now, in between each of these segments, though, Shusha would sing one of her original songs while dancing around with the kids in the studio. And finally, at the end of the episode, this was something she did in Brazil. I know she does it on the first episode. I don't know if she did it through every episode, but she puts on bright red lipstick. She chooses one kid in the audience who's the special kid of the day to be marked by her kiss with big red lip prints on their cheek at the end of the episode. So did I miss anything, Will?
Oh, I mean, there's so much, but you covered most of it. I would say, like, for the people trying to picture this, it's like if you took Lisa Frank and Michael Jackson and put them in the body of a former go-go dancer. That is the Shusha experience. But you pretty much nailed it. Like, we'll get into more with, like, the cheers and jeers, but that is the general. It's funny you were able to do that because I would almost argue no two episodes are the same. Like, even though there are these regular segments, I watched a slew of these things and they don't really follow a formula, but it's really interesting, like, some of the guests, like, early days, like Jeff Dunham was on there.
Yeah.
I realized he was 62 years old, you know? Like, so he's on there. The Olsen twins are on there twice. They're on there the first time, and she's like, I hope you will come back one day. And they're like, maybe. And they're not even, like, famous at this point. They just know this is a train wreck. But they do come back, and they sing a song called No One Tells the President What to Do. And while they're singing, there is a Bill Clinton parody in the, this is the most dated 90s thing. He's like dancing on his desk and playing with the fish tank. He's doing kid things, but it's like the worst Bill Clinton impersonator you've ever seen. It's a mind trick.
Yeah, like you say, you never knew what you were going to get. I will say the only other thing that I forgot to mention, I just realized is, so Shusha, she was so famous in Brazil that, like, literally she couldn't go out. She would just be mobbed everywhere she go. When she makes a public appearance, and this is true of, like, I have a lot of, like, band videos of, like, you know, the Ramones or whoever, when they go to tour in Brazil, your van always gets mobbed by people on the street. They're basically trying to flip your van over. Like, she got kidnapped once, like, or almost kidnapped. Like, it's really, really crazy down there. And so for her, like, her refuge is animals. And so, like, she loves, like, taking care of animals, but, like, exotic animals. And she does a thing called Ask Shusha, most episodes as well, where supposedly a kid has written in. Now, the show didn't exist. They were filming all these episodes, one after the other. I don't think it had time to air where they were getting actual letters. But anyway, one of them asked, I remember, like, what are we doing to save the, California condor? And then, like, it's all about, how we're going to save them from extinction and things like that. So that was like another big thing. Even her animal friends, they were, supposedly like in danger of extinction. The panda, the jaguar, I don't know. So it's kind of this idea of that, Shusho is going to also have that Earth conscious Captain Planet type bent to her as well.
Well, it's the early 90s, but it's so awkward. Like, you almost expect her to turn to the furries and be like, how does it feel that you are going to die soon?
Yeah.
Like just like that. And the kids would just laugh and smile and take it. It's a crazy experience. But you were mentioning she was almost kidnapped. Like, it was teenagers and the cops killed them. And I'm like, they were all hopped up on hormones because look, this whole thing just confused them. But it's such a crazy experience. Even Entertainment Tonight, and this is John Tesh era,
Yeah.
so that shows how old it is. But he calls her the sensual Pied Piper of children. And I'm okay.
We're going to dig into that further. But in the meantime, let's dig through the madness. Let's sort through the crowd and find these shining bright moments as we give Shusha our cheers. Almost the only thing you can say, the show was unique. There was nothing like it. It was a kid's fever dream of what a TV show should be. If an executive grabbed like a kid and said, what do you want your show to be? Well, there'd be a nice pretty lady and she tells you to be as loud as you want, and there's animal people doing flips, and you get to play games, and no matter what happens in the games, you get a prize at the end. And also, Michelle from Full House is there. Like, it just feels like the kind of mayhem kids say they want. And for 30 minutes every day, you would imagine every child would want to be let loose with Shusha. It seems like that's what kids are asking for.
Yeah, it is unique. It's almost surreal. Like, she sings a song about being a good sibling while she's straddling an animatronic dragon. I knew some guys in college who went on to write for Adult Swim. And like, if you're not really into Adult Swim or an insomniac like I am, after 4 a.m. they air these things called Off the Air, which tend to be like really weird parodies that just sort of stew in discomfort. Like, most people know Too Many Cooks because it like went viral. That's the kind of humor you would get, even though Too Many Cooks aired like earlier when more people were awake. But this feels like that. It feels like the kind of stuff they were writing for Adult Swim. The kids are all riled up and excited, but over what? It's like you were saying with the letters. They don't know who she is. They haven't been briefed on her, but they're overreacting as much as the Brazilian kids would, I'm kind of like, did she promise each of them a Game Gear and a TurboGrafx 16? Because like, they are excited, but it is forced excitement. It's, I don't want to say cringe, but unsettling. And this is a cheer. Like, I know we haven't gotten to cheers yet, but like, you kind of have to sit with it and let it get into you. It's an experience.
Yeah, it's pure mania. You're just like, you're witnessing the mania of children, whatever inspired it. But I will say, her songs are actually very catchy. The theme song especially is an earworm. Like, I've been singing it to myself all week in preparation for this episode. And every time she sings a song, I'm pretty dialed in. Like, I'm just like, let me pay attention to what's going on here with Shusha's song. I'm not saying they're like #1 jams. I'm just saying that they have a hook, all of them, and you can kind of get into it.
They all sound like things that an ice cream truck would play. Like, they got good melodies, but I don't know what the hell she's saying. But like, my favorite part is her kiss is reminiscent of WWF superstar Ravishing Rick Rude. Now, growing up, Ravishing Rick Rude was my favorite wrestler because when he would win a match against a jobber, because this is the era where stars didn't go against stars, you went against the guy who worked at Jiffy Lube all week, So it was like, when he would win a match, he would choose a lady from the audience. He would bring her into the ring and he would give her a passionate kiss. A kiss so passionate that she would faint, at which point he'd gently lay her down in the ring, and then he'd do his ravishing gyration over her unconscious body. You know, that's actually kind of sus. But that was the same kind of feeling I felt when, like, Shusha would do her thing at the end of the show. Like you said, it was ceremonial. She pulls out the lipstick, she shines it up real nice, turns it sideways. And then she just pulls the kid out. She asks them which side they want the kiss on. But oh, it doesn't matter because she's going to kiss both cheeks. She's going to kiss them both. But the beauty of it, though, is you were saying she does it in the first episode, but you weren't sure if she keeps doing it. She's inconsistent, which leads to humor. There's an Ed Alonzo episode where the first game, they do the crazy double dare stuff with like some jello, and she kisses them both on the cheek. She even licks her lips because she gets some of the jello on them from kissing the kid. In the next game later in the episode, there are these like tween boys who you can tell they're getting really, in DC the word is sized. So they're getting really hyped for this kiss from Shusha. And what does she do? She shakes their hands.
Man. Shusha, it's got to be equal across the board.
Exactly.
But now the other thing I want to point out that I think is pretty cool, and it adds to that surreal nature, it's the free-form camera work. The cameraman is just wandering around the entire set. You never know where the camera's going to be when they're going to cut to it, because the entire set, like there's like, you know, a pirate ship or something over here, and then there's always just these weird constructs around, and then it just adds a lot of energy to the show because he'll be filming some random kids dancing, then I'll go up to this area, back to Shusha, back to the kids, like, but it's always at not even Dutch angles. It's just like mayhem. You were talking about wrestling earlier, you know, it's like the wrestlers are getting too close to the cameraman on the outside of the ring and he's kind of shaking, you know, he's like, oh, I gotta get out of the way. Like, that's how the camera is all the time during like the songs and stuff, and so that's kind of wild. Like, it gets your attention because you're like, what's it going to capture? What's coming up next? All right, well, I feel like the cheers is a short section this time around. Really, our cheers are going to be some strange limbo space in between, because what gives the show its special nature is its wackadoo sensibilities. So, Will, it's time to get into our jeers.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
Yeah. So I did a lot of research on this, and they said that while she had conquered Brazil, she was hesitant to come to America because she didn't want to do it until she had a greater grasp of the English language. So, like, I kind of agree with her. This was a show that really needed subtitles. And I didn't care when I watched it before because, like, I was 12 and I'm like, ooh, pretty girl. But, like, watching it, she seems almost uncomfortable in front of the camera. Like, her enthusiasm dies quickly. Like, the fact that she got through the 65 episodes, and what people may not know is she went to the hospital for exhaustion once she was done filming the American series. Like, it took a lot out of her. I'll talk some more about this later, but like right now, it's just she's very uncomfortable in front of the camera, which is crazy considering she's a superstar. She's not even like Tiffany level, like, oh, she has a hit song and she tours shopping malls. Like, she is the messiah somewhere and she can't hack it on double-digit TV. Like, I don't know.
It's crazy. And to your point about her like getting sick after filming all those episodes, I found a clip of the Today Show. And on the Today Show, they're hyping her up. They're like, this Brazilian superstar, Shusha, we're going to find out what she's all about, why she's here to do this children's show in America. And then it cuts to after the commercial break. Unfortunately, Shusha not going to be able to make it. She's feeling ill. She's laying on the ground in our dressing room right now. We're sadly not going to be able to talk to Shusha. I think that was like right as the show's about to premiere, she was done filming and she had lost her ability to just even be present, you know, so that's crazy. But you're totally right. Like, if you watch clips of the Brazilian version of the show, completely different vibe. She is so animated. She's so comfortable. It's her people, like you say. But I think the problem is, it's not like she ever lived in the United States. She doesn't know our culture. So, like, she doesn't know who any of the special guests are because she hasn't been living here watching TV for a decade, you know? It's like on her first episode, for example, she has Cheech Marin. He comes on singing a song from his children's album about being Cheech the bus driver, but she calls him Chi Marine. She's like, Chi Marine is here. He's sing a song. You know, and then she doesn't understand English as much as she can't speak English. And you see her grasping for phrases and she can't find the translation. Like the children she is entertaining speak English better than her. She can sort of find the word she's looking for, but then she loses it. Like the biggest example I saw when Raven Simone appears on this episode to perform a crisscross style rap from her own music album, and Raven rocks it. She is so good. And then apparently that is the thing. She had an album. But in the post-performance interview, XUXA asks, she's like, what's top for the picture? And you see Raven like totally perplexed and silent for a second. She's like, but because she's such a professional, even at like 7 years old, Raven just starts plugging the fact that she's going to be a cast member on Hanging with Mr. Cooper soon. And so she gets into that. And then XUXA's not done, but she has no idea what that show is. So she can't comment on it. So she panics and she says, if you like to say something to everybody, please. You know, like save me, Raven. And Raven, again, she should be hosting the show instead of XUXA. She totally improvs and just says, follow your hopes and dreams. Never stop having fun. And you're just like, Raven, you saved the day.
Yeah, she doesn't know our culture at all. And just to tag on to that, I think as a society, we have forgotten how amazing Raven Simone was because Hanging with Mr. Cooper neutered her. And then she becomes That's So Raven and all that. She was probably the best child star of like my growing up. Yeah. Like when she hit the Cosby Show, it's kind of like, why isn't she getting a spinoff? Like this show is not good enough for her. But then like she grew up and whatever. But yeah, you're right. It's one of those things, if you could probably have a fun drinking game or whatever, like picking out the flaws and her discomfort. But like from this level, I really feel for her. Like I feel bad for her because another thing going on, if you get the Mean Girls reference, she keeps trying to make fetch happen. Somebody decided she needed a catchphrase and she keeps trying to say, drop the chicken.
Yeah.
Like in multiple episodes. And I'm trying to figure out, does that mean something in Brazil and it just loses something in translation? I don't even know where to begin with that. Why am I dropping the chicken? Like, did it bite me? Like, do I want to eat it? Like, I don't know. But you were saying she doesn't know our culture. I blame that on handlers. She was not set up for success. And I said the same thing on Kids Incorporated, and I'm saying it here. This is Thomas W. Lynch's fault. Because I don't feel we get any of the XUXA that made her an international star. Like, as the kids say, she has zero riz, which is for charisma. Like, she's very pretty, but she's not charismatic. If I didn't know about the Brazilian fame and all that, this feels like a project that was fueled by vanity and nepotism. It's like she's the daughter or mistress of some studio exec who's used his sway to make her famous. Like, it's almost unfathomable that she's a billionaire, but she is very important in Brazil. The problem, I think, though, and this is Will being ignorant, but the American educational system failed me because I don't know anything about anything south of Mexico. Not a thing. Like, sure, they'll teach us about the Alamo and we'll do European history, but I know nothing about XUXA's homeland except for waxes and XUXA. And so even seeing her, I was like, they have blondes down there? Like, complete surprise. And I read that, like, market research showed that was kind of why people didn't flock to her because she didn't match what America considers a Latin woman to be. Because we don't see blue-eyed, blonde-haired ones. And so it was kind of like, does not compute. Like, I know we've talked about this before where I probably didn't even know she was from Brazil until the internet era. because they weren't really saying Brazil then. She was just this international woman who really celebrated all countries. They're all waving multiple flags there in that audience. But it's kind of like the whole urban legend telephone thing of we're like, how did we all know to blow into Nintendo cartridges if we didn't have the internet? It's the same thing of we all heard, oh yeah, she's a Swedish porn star. And it's like, it's that telephone of like, there's a grain of truth to it in that she did an adult movie, but it's not what America considers pornography. It's certainly not what Brazil considered pornography. And it was like one movie and she wasn't Swedish. But we looked at her and we were like, oh, that's what a Swedish woman looks like. So my whole life, probably till college, I'm like, oh yeah, remember when they gave that kids show to that Swedish porn star? You know, so it's just kind of like all these discoveries. What we got in this show it didn't showcase who XUXA truly was.
No, and just to give again the context of Brazil and South America in general, after World War II, a lot of Germans migrated to South America for reasons. So there is a heavy German influence in Brazil. There's a lot of blonde people with fair skin, and you walk around even friends of mine that were blonde, they'd be like, "Oh, alemão," which is how you say German. Hey, German. They just call you German if you're a blonde, fair-skinned person walking around in Brazil. So that's definitely a thing, but you wouldn't know. Yeah, because we, especially in the US, our closest neighbors, like you say, are Mexico. We're used to, a certain skin tone from Mexico, I think is what a lot of people think. We're ignorant that way. But here's what I think is actually the biggest problem. Aside from her not feeling comfortable with the language and all those things, the unintentional sensuality of XUXA is a problem. John Tesh couldn't help but mention it. But she is so attractive that everything she does feels like she's seducing the camera. She's seducing the children, the animal people, that are in costumes. She's caressing them. She's pulling them close. Because I'll just tell you this is not to generalize, but in my time there for several years, I can tell you the Brazilian people are very touchy-feely. Personal space is not a thing. They greet you with a kiss on the cheek. They want to dance at any moment. They want to rub up against you. They're ready to party. They wear pretty revealing clothes. Like all these things that to our American sensibilities they are so much more free with their affection and their bodies. And we're very prudish here, even just the 25% of that, because they cover her head to toe. If you look at what she wore in Brazil on her show compared to what she's wearing on the American show, very different, because parents would think that's inappropriate for a kid's show host. But like you said, she's putting on sexy lipstick and kissing kids. In Brazil, that's not a big thing. They're kissing each other all the time. But to us, an adult kissing a child with lipstick on, the lipstick is for a purpose, usually. Like you're trying to attract a certain attention. And so it became even more of an issue even during that time, for the brief time she was on the air, because you said she made a film where, she is seducing a young boy in that film, sort of like it's a weird thing. But she was a model before. She did a lot of nude magazine layouts. She was in Playboy. So when that comes down, a lot of people are saying like, that's not okay. You can't have somebody who did that now also be an icon for children. In Brazil, it doesn't matter. Like they don't care about that because again, they're very free with their bodies. Like it's not a big deal. You'll walk down the street and you'll see naked pictures and posters and stuff just posted around. Like, so I feel like there is this sexuality that comes just naturally from her, even for a child. Like you're saying, you're 12 years old, you're like pretty girl, but like that's not the demographic that it was for. And so I think like parents who are watching, like, what is she doing? Like, this is not appropriate for my child to watch, even though she has, no intentions, but culturally it's so different. But I don't know what you think about that.
I get that, but I think the tug of war between who she is in Brazil in making her palatable to American audiences, I think that neutered the whole thing where she's stuck in this limbo where you're kind of like piss or get off the pot. Like looking back at it, I feel like we imposed all this sexuality and stuff on her because she's a beautiful woman who happened to have been a model and there's all this stuff out there. But I almost get an asexual vibe off of her. Like even maybe she's uncomfortable with like the Americanized sexuality. You sent me some clips from the Brazilian thing, and that must have been near the end of her run there, because she was phoning it in at that point when her musical guest was Gillette, whose radio edit is short man. That's all we can say right now. But they performed the whole song unedited on Brazilian TV.
Yeah.
And that's her music countdown show, you know? It's almost like I was talking to somebody about this recently where John F. Kennedy Jr. was this like playboy. He was like this trophy of like high society. When like if you ever really like looked at interviews with him or seen like who he was just this awkward guy who happened to have been attractive and he came from this dynasty, but he wasn't this like prize. It was just what he meant because he was a Kennedy. And it's the same here. I feel like XUXA, we're imposing this whole like, oh man, she was so hot because you know she did porn in Sweden. But looking back at it, it's like I was 12 and she was a beautiful woman, but she doesn't want to be here, and I feel bad for her not wanting to be here. And I don't know if like it would have been better if they had let her be herself more, or if it was the language barrier or her own insecurity. Something is not working, but she doesn't go full sexy. I don't know. Like,
yeah, it's not intentional in any way, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's the American perception, because again, like that's what I'm saying. Like, having lived in both countries, I can tell you could misinterpret a lot of just the friendliness of Brazilian people and think they're coming on to you, and you're like, no, like in their culture, that's just how you show friendship and affection. But in America, it's like, oh, you only do that with somebody you're like romantically interested in, and that's what I'm saying.
I just can't figure out if she got nervous because she didn't know the language. Because if you watch these episodes, she comes out with these non sequiturs, or she might make a little noise or do a little voice, or pretend she's like a monster, where you're like, if she weren't hot, you would distance yourself from this person. If you ran into her at a party and she's like the Olsen Twins, she does this little weird thing, like when she's talking about how they're going to come out and perform later. She's like, oh, the Olsen Twins from Full House. You know, it's like this voice where you're like, ew, where did that come from?
It's very different. There's a lot of stuff in Brazil, like the affectations and things that would offend. Like, it feels like you're talking down to me. Like, for example, like just to say like, oh no, I'm not interested in that. Like, you wave your finger at somebody and you go, you know, so you're like, like you
finger,
little baby, your little baby, no. But to them, that's just like you go, no, I'm not interested in that. Let's do this other thing. But when the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, he's gonna beat that guy up. He did that to him, and it's like, no, that's just for them in their culture. That's okay, you know. So there is the awkwardness overall, but I do want to say the chaos of the show is also a problem because it makes you worry about the safety of everyone on screen. Because yes, like the pixies are kind of wrangling them and trying to keep them like out of the area where, you know, XUXA has to dance or something. But a lot of times the kids just run in front of XUXA. They start dancing. They'll run like when XUXA's coming down the stairs, they grab her and they pull her, like, because kids are just being kids and there's so many in one place. You can't be in charge of all of them at one time. And it like even the games, the kids are slipping and sliding and falling. And the fact that they did a sumo wrestling game where like they put them in football helmets and these sumo pads and they're supposed to knock each other over, that's not a safe game. That's a liability. You can't do that, you know. Like so like that, there's just the chaos is an attractive thing, and at the same time it freaks you out. Maybe that's just the parent in me now.
No, you were definitely right there, because this is one of those shows, kind of like we're saying the urban legend with the Nintendo game. Like if I heard like, oh yeah, did you know 12 kids died filming an episode of XUXA? I would totally believe it.
Yeah.
Like I would completely, and I don't remember who it was. I feel like it was at RetroCon, but I was talking to someone about like, oh yeah, we're going to talk about XUXA. And somebody's like, are you going to talk about the fire? And like in researching, I found nothing about a fire, but see, there's something out there where apparently there was a fire during an episode. You know what I mean? It's like they tell parents, she's trying way too hard to be their friend instead of their parent. and she's not supposed to be their parent, but she's too damn old to be their friend. And so it's like she's not even like their older sister, and she's not even like the cute babysitter because she's not getting paid for this. It's almost like they met a cool older girl on a bus who's on her way running away from her house anyway. But she's like, oh, I'm going to take these kids under my wing. You know, she's irresponsible as hell, but it makes for good TV. But why she's in this chaos, and I think there's like this through line back to earlier I mentioned she was like Lisa Frank and Michael Jackson. And there's a lot of parallels with Michael Jackson for various reasons. First off, I think they shared this whole kinship with children, which then can lead to allegations or uncomfortable situations. But then it's like she's got an animal sanctuary, kind of like his ranch, you know, like she keeps animals that her fans just send her. And then she's got like a prize room of things her fans have sent her. Most people, like, they get that stuff and they give it away to like the bus driver or the security guards, but she keeps a room of it, you know? And then there's even the rumor, well, not a rumor, she has said that at one point in time around 2012, that's when she did the interview, she said at one point in time, Michael Jackson's people reached out to her for him to court her, and potentially she would bear his children when he was doing that whole deal. But there are a lot of similarities, and that's where I go back to this whole, like, I think completely she's asexual in that she's really a giant child. She's doing this crap because she relates to these kids. She relates to just the feeling that fun, unbridled fun gives you. This feels like a Rebel Wilson movie. Like at some point she's got to like have that wake up call of, you're a grown up, Shusha. First off, your name is Mary. Like, stop calling yourself Shusha. Go get a bank account and get your GED. You know? It's such an uncomfortable place to be because it's not an R. Kelly situation. She's not grooming these kids. It's nothing like that. She just loves the company of children because they like bring out the youth and fun in her. But that didn't land well then, and it really wouldn't land well now.
Yeah, the innocence is very clear when you see her and how she interacts with people. I do have to talk about something that took away my innocence and my final jeer. This has been my jeer for 31 years about Shusha. As a kid, her two furry helpers freaked me out. That's the real reason I gave up on that show after a week. That's what I remembered most about Shusha for all those years. Those costumes are too good. Let me explain. This is beyond Zoobly Zoo animal people. They look like real mutants from the island of Dr. Moreau. The mouths articulate naturally. They have full range of motion. The eyes are fully on display. It's very unsettling. It's not cartoony enough to be a fun visual on a kid's show. They should be the subject of an episode of the reboot of The Outer Limits that was on around this time, where they tell a sci-fi horror story about the dangers of gene splicing. It is horrific, and I do not like them.
Yeah, because like with Zoobly Zoo, there were costumes, but then it was face paint. It may be like a mane, but you still saw the human in there. And they aren't cuddly. Like, they're not toyetic or like kid focused as much as you think they would be. Like, their kids, they're probably ranging from 7 to 11. The contestant kids tend to be around 11, but like the mascots, I guess that's why they didn't make them more cuddly. But then when you're like 11, you don't want that. And they are furries. Like, they are furries who invested a lot in this subculture, and it is off-putting. It is, because like they should probably have like a super deformed like giant panda head instead of a reasonably sized panda head. This is like Shredder dropped another canister of mutagen, and this is what you got. But she can wrangle them, so at least the kids are safe. Like, I guess.
Well, and frankly, those guys, they save the day more often than not. Because when Shusha loses their words, they can fill it in because they're Americans. They explain the games. They explain like things that maybe Shusha's not getting, you know? So like they make you feel comfortable when, like you said, this person who's in charge who doesn't know what's going on and can't handle it, they can communicate where she can't. And so like they make you feel a little bit comfortable while also freaking you out when you realize it's a panda man with deep dark eyes poking out of a mask that are talking to you and trying to get you to like stick your head in a bowl of jello.
I would love to watch a documentary where we find out they were just like two off-duty cops and they're just like chain smoking like, yeah, I was there with Shusha. I saw some stuff.
But man, yeah, I mean, this patient, I do not know if it can be revived. I don't know what there is that we can offer, but we have to try. Okay, we took the Hippocratic Oath, Will. We got to get into it. We are the show doctors. There's no fixing this show, Will. Shusha is the problem. Putting it around Shusha in America, it just can't be done.
I think I can do it.
Okay.
I think I can do it. I gotta roll up my sleeves here. Remember that period back at Hopkins. So, this is a tough one. What we do, right? We're really skirting the edge here, but what we're gonna do in current children's programming, you have a lot of figures. You've got like Miss Something. She teaches them how to read. My kids didn't watch that one, but they did watch Blippi. And Blippi has similar issues to Shusha.
His checkered past, yes.
He has a checkered past. Prior to becoming Blippi, did a video which has since been scrubbed from the internet, but it was very inappropriate. And then he later evolved and created the character of Blippi that is so successful that Blippi is almost a Bozo the Clown now. There are two Blippies. And so there's like Blippi Prime who will do the show, but then there's like Blippi Jr. or whatever who they send out on tour. So then he introduces Mika, where it's like, hey, Blippi's got a black friend and it's a girl. But Mika turned out to be so successful and she got pregnant that there's now a Mika 2. So I'm thinking we franchise Shusha. But if you've seen Shusha lately, she's 61, but she's kept it tight. So we keep her in the picture as Mama Shusha. That's why I say we're skirting things, because it's almost like she's a madam. But I don't want to posit it that way. She's Zordon. She is Brazilian Zordon who dispatches her international Shushas on missions. And these missions could be like, oh, this Shusha is at SeaWorld. Because, you know, she did do those educational segments, which really ruined the flow of the show. Yeah. It's like, here's a Double Dare thing. Here's the Olsen Twins. Here's a 3-minute video on manatees. But, like, Blippi does that. It's like, oh, I'm going to go to this fun zone after hours because I can't be filmed around children. That happens a lot with Blippi. But, like, you could still kind of monetize Shusha in America that way. It's almost a two-way street because you would send them to these landmarks like, oh, today Shusha's at the Smithsonian, but then they return back to Mama Shusha, relay what they've learned, and then she learns more about America. Now, where this is headed, I don't know, but kids shows don't need arcs. Back then you did your 65 episodes that needed to last you till like June. But here, you put it on Netflix, you only got to film 10 episodes. It's almost like Inspector Gadget's Field Trip. I think that's what it was called. That's like the Lost Inspector Gadget cartoon that nobody talks about because it's in that window between Gadget Boy and Heather and then the reboot. But it was like, he would just show you landmarks. You could even do it where it's like, oh, she could not get America altogether. As I said before, we know nothing of South America. So Mama Shusha comes to America to recruit a fleet of Shushettes. Or maybe they're the Pinkies. Like, so she's still Shusha, you know, because, like, if you call everyone Shusha, then she's not special anymore. But they could teach us about South American geography and landmarks and history. And then if you syndicate it, it counts for, like, educational and informational. And you can slap that baby on Saturday mornings. And I love syndication. So that's what I'm doing. Shusha comes back to teach us about where she came from.
Oh, wow. I can't believe it. You managed to give us something, Shusha, that is the complete opposite of what we got. Instead of all nonsense, it's educational.
And just to keep it Shusha, we're going to bring back the tiger and the bear, but this time it's going to be CGI, but it's that weird Polar Express CGI that's too close to the uncanny valley, so we won't be comfortable with them the same way we weren't comfortable with them in Suits.
Now, the only other thing I want to add to it, because here's the thing, we kind of mentioned this, Shusha has an appeal to an older demographic too on some level, but I think it would be interesting to have the reality show version, The Search for Shusha. So that's like a separate thing. The children's thing happens, but we have the talent show. And again, like there's an international flavor. It's taking place in Brazil, but people from all over the world can come to join Shusha's team, and they have to learn, they have to do the singing, the dancing, the relating to kids, the teaching, exude the innocence and all those things. But they would probably all be very beautiful as well. And so that would like appeal in a general sense to the older audience.
So you're proposing a shoe church.
You've done it well. The shoe church.
We can just take it one step further and just have her buy the Miss Universe pageant.
It's the only logical step. It's an outdated institution. Oh, wow. Shusha. Can't believe that we arrived at Shusha. We survived Shusha, but it was nothing but a confusing joy throughout the entire research process.
As the commercial told me that fateful day in July of 1993, when I knew nothing about who she was or what she'd do, she's FUNbelievable.
There it is. Redefining the English language. Making up words that she didn't know anyway. All right, so here's what we got to do, Will, though. This has been fun. This has been light. This has been bright, but we are entering the Halloween season. Things are about to get a little dark, a little mysterious, a little spooky. We've not done like a serious action, supernatural based show. So we've decided to bring you some gore on the shore. We're taking you from the light into the night. That's right. It's Baywatch Nights. Oh, this is going to be a fun conversation. This is a show that is infamous, a spin-off from the regular series starring David Hasselhoff, getting back to his action-adventure hero roots. We hope that you will be ready for it. It is available on YouTube. You will be able to find it. So will it be a treat? Will it be a trick? We will find out.
And I believe as of this episode, we have socials for the show now. You should tell the people about those.
This is a big announcement. So prior to this, the first 20 episodes, Will and I have just been sharing our excitement on our own private channels. But now, yes, you can find us on social media. We are at Remember Show Pod. Just search Remember Show Pod. We're on Instagram right now. We're on X, so you can reach out, find us on Threads. So we'll be posting there the updates. We'll be reminding you about the older episodes as well, just in case you missed some of those in the early days of the show. So that is somewhere where you can also, usually before these shows go up, we're sharing a link to where you can find it online to watch along. A lot of them, like we say, the whole point, they're obscure, but some people have preserved them and you can get your fix, in this case, Shusha. But yeah, so going forward, just find us at Remember Show Pod, subscribe there so that we can stay in touch with you. But you can also go to geekster.com and find all the other retro-tastic content that is available there. A lot of it these days featuring myself and Will, so you can go check that out also on their YouTube channel, the Geekster Vision YouTube channel. But thank you so much for checking out this episode. And until next time, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.